and welcome to Chelmsford High School. Where are they now? I am your host, Heather Lindstedt, class of 1985, and I am joined today by Katie McSheehy, LaRochelle, class of 1994. Wow, everybody's getting so young. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Great. Thank you for being here. Although it's talking about 94, it must seem like a long time ago since you graduated from Chelmsford High.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does, especially because I have an 8th grader and I don't know how that happened. So
Right.
next year I'll be a parent.
That does happen to all of us, right? We grow a little bit older, but this show is about finding out more about where you've been and how it all turned out from all of your experiences at Chelmsford. But certainly you had, with your parents and some other people living in Chelmsford, so it's often funny to find out from everybody, like, you know, was there a big influence by your parents or an expectation, did you feel like, going to the Chelmsford High School?
I think it was just expected. It was just understood.
Yeah.
We were a townie family, and I remember from the time I was little, my dad's dad, my grumpy, saying things like, you know, if you don't know anything else, Kate, you have to remember that we hate the Yankees and we hate Bill Ricca. From like the time I was really little.
And you'll always be a Lion?
Always be a Lion.
Yeah, it didn't matter where you go, you'll always be a Lion.
No. And we always joke because it feels like no matter where we go on vacation, we seem to find people from Chelmsford or who have family in Chelmsford. I remember when I moved to California, we went out one of the first weekends to a little Irish bar downtown, and like randomly the people sitting at the bar next to us were from Chelmsford. It was just so funny.
Small world.
Small world.
Yeah. But when you went to Chelmsford High, I mean, you had to make your mark. Obviously, you're the oldest. You have a sister who graduated, but you had to make the mark. Yeah. Walking into the doors of Chelmsford High School, you know, with the expectations, what was your feeling with all the teachers? Maybe you knew some of them or had a little bit of knowledge because of people talking about them. But when you walked in, what was the whole culture that you felt when you walked into those doors?
I think I just always felt really comfortable in schools. My mom was a teacher, and then she was home with us when I was little, but when I was in middle school, went back to subbing in Chelmsford. So for the awkward years I was at McCarthy, she would sub. She was only my sub once or twice. But I just have felt comfortable in schools. I think I knew from a young age I wanted to be a teacher, and I enjoyed school. So I think I was excited to be part of that Chelmsford High family that my parents so strongly identify with.
So you knew before you met some of the teachers at Chelmsford High that teaching was probably your pathway?
Oh yeah, forever, since I was little, elementary school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But all the clubs and everything, and we talk about it all the time, sometimes there's something that influences you, maybe in the classroom, maybe some of the clubs and activities that you took on. Is there something in particular, though, that now that we'll talk about you getting into education, but that you remember that's kind of sparked, like, if I get into teaching, which I think you knew, would be something that you'd always want to bring to your teaching?
Yeah, I think one of the fun experiences I had was toward the end, it must have been my senior year, our guidance counselor was kicking off a pilot program of Future Teachers of America. And it involved once a month going to spend a whole day, skipping Chelmsford High, and going to spend a whole day in an elementary school classroom. And so I was able to go back to Harrington, which geographically was very convenient because I could take the bus to Chelmsford High and walk to Harrington. And I was able once a month to spend the day with my first grade teacher, who I had had for first grade, Ruth Ann Ellis. And it just confirmed for me that was the path I wanted. I was really happy to be working with kids and the excitement of watching them learn to read, especially in first grade. So.
Yeah. But is there something that you thought with the reading and stuff like that you might want to get into, or was it really just education and I'll find my way of teaching?
I think it was just I was going to be a teacher. There was a time after my undergrad, after the year I had spent in the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, where I considered maybe doing social work instead.
Yep.
I didn't have the thickness of skin that I think you need to do social work, especially with young people, and all of the, dealing with trauma and so much of what that job brings. And I just missed the classroom that year that I wasn't in it.
But you were in the choir and those things. That didn't influence you into the, teaching music or the arts or any of that?
No, it's funny. I briefly considered majoring. When I got to UMass Amherst, you couldn't major in education. You had to have a different major and then apply to the School of Ed at the end of sophomore year. And I considered music as a major.
So you did think about it?
I did think about it, but not to teach. I don't think I ever would have wanted to teach. It was just because it was something else I loved, and I felt like I would love to know more about it and have a chance to really focus on it in a very concentrated and purposeful way. But being a music major involves a lot of commitment and time, and you don't really finish in 4 years if you want to also have a teaching degree when you're done. And so I got kind of talked out of it by an advisor. No, I never wanted to teach music. Music is something I do for fun and to relax. Yeah. But I was never tempted to wander into the classroom of the music teachers.
So you do it for fun, but you know that if you had to, do you think you could teach it?
I think if I had to, I absolutely could. I wish I played an instrument. That's the thing that I'm missing. I wish I could play piano or guitar, but...
and even during COVID, you didn't pick that up, huh? There was always something
that
to
was
do.
the list of things on the list of things I was going to learn during COVID. Yeah. Crocheting and
Yeah, okay. So after Chelmsford High, though, I mean, you had a great time there, obviously, and then you kind of mentioned, but then you moseyed over to UMass. So how would you find your way there?
It's kind of funny because we joked even when we got there that it was like Chelmsford High West. Yeah. Because I would go to Stop and Shop and bump into my friends' moms there in Amherst. And there were 5 people from Chelmsford on my floor in my dorm. But it's a big enough place that you very quickly meet people from all over. I was worried that it was going to be too big coming out of a relatively small place like Chelmsford, but you make your community, which I did in the music department. I basically lived in the fine arts department anytime I wasn't in classes. And then, of course, as a freshman, you travel with the pack in your dorm. And I'm still very good friends. This weekend is homecoming at UMass Amherst, and I'm going out to Amherst with a girl that I met, at orientation at UMass Amherst.
Not from Chelmsford?
Not from Chelmsford. And we're still really, really good friends, and she lives in Waltham, and I live here, and So
now, can you sing the theme song? Because, people would say something like, I'm from Billerica, and I would, quickly, or act in, when I bumped into him in college, and I would quickly just...
The Chelmsford High theme song?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I know most of the color guard routine to it, too. I was laughing at the football game a couple weekends ago. I'm like, that color guard routine has not changed much since the early 90s.
And it's funny, though. Like, nothing really changes, but you can bring it up.
Yeah.
And, I don't know, flex your muscles, I guess, out at UMass, though, even.
Yeah. And I always joked I was only going to go to schools that had maroon as one of their colors, because I went from here to UMass, which is maroon and white or maroon and gray, and then to BC, which is maroon and gold. So all of my apparel is maroon.
So from UMass, though, did you go directly to Boston College, or did you made the stop, right?
I made a stop, I took a year. Volunteering was something I'd wanted to do as an undergrad, and because I was getting a degree in psych and getting certified to teach, and so involved in the music department, there wasn't enough time to do that. And so one of the things I'd been introduced to, I spent a lot of time at the Newman Center on campus, the Catholic Newman Center, and I heard about this thing called the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, which it's sort of like the Peace Corps, but domestic. And it's 12 months living in somewhere around the U.S., and I decided that rather than try to do a little bit of volunteering here and there, I would just take a year off I knew I needed a master's, because in Massachusetts to teach, you need a master's. And I would use it as a year to kind of figure things out. Yep. So that's where I had a chance to be a social worker for a year. I worked in a shelter for homeless youth ages 12 to 17. And we were right on the border, so that opened my eyes to a whole bunch of other issues that living in Massachusetts, we don't really deal with border issues. And it gave me a chance to try out social work and work in a really different place, but still working with kids. And in the spring of that year, I had the opportunity to teach an independent living skills class to the San Diego County Homeless Outreach School, where kids can they earn their GED based on credits and stuff. And I had a chance to teach a class, and I was like, oh yeah, no, this is where I need to be. So that solidified my decision to do graduate school in education.
And did that help you with the age that you wanted to teach, or no?
Yeah, I think it definitely drove home for me that teenagers were not my jam in the classroom. The kids I was working with were special, and it was such one-on-one that I loved it.
Yep.
I definitely considered, do I want to be like a high school math teacher or something? But again, having done the first grade internship at Harrington and seeing that, I just loved watching kids learn to read and being part of that emerging literacy journey for kids, helping them fall in love with reading, rather than reading, The Telltale Heart and all these things that my kid is now reading as an 8th grader. So, yeah.
So you didn't steal anything from Chelmsford High there, you stole it all from Harrington.
I stole it all from Harrington. Although I took Chelmsford High, my freshman English teacher, Mrs. McCoy, she pushed me. She was one of the first teachers that, she wrote a big D on one of my papers, and it was the first time I'd ever seen anything like that, and I was very taken aback. And
do you still have it?
I don't
think
I do. Maybe I could dig it out of a box. But then she worked with me, and I revised it to, it was a C+, and then I revised it again. And she just taught me to push myself and to not just settle for what the first easy thing that came out of my brain was. And she challenged me in a way that I didn't appreciate until after.
Right.
And what helped me get really attached to her was sophomore year, I had Mrs. Silva for English, and those two were thick as thieves. And watching Mrs. Silva and Mrs. McCoy interact, that was what sold me on, okay, fine, Mrs. McCoy is amazing. And the two of them, they just had such joy with teaching that it might not have been the content that I was leaning toward, but it was that absolute love of their students and dedication to their students. And they just really enjoyed being at school with us. And it was very clear.
Yeah. So how did you find Boston College then? Just the maroon thing?
No, not just the maroon thing. You'd think it might be. That definitely was a factor, no. Because I was in the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, I lived with 8 other volunteers in a house, and I was part of a large region in California and Arizona. And I was the only public school college graduate in my house. Everybody had gone to Jesuit schools because they're really the feeder program for JVC. And I was telling one of my roommates about how I was considering how to take what I was learning in JVC and sort of work forward as a teacher. He's like, oh, Boston College has this amazing program called the Donovan program, and it focuses on urban education. And so I ended up applying to BC and BU because BU had a dual MED, Master's in Social Work, that I considered too. But in the end, I ended up at BC. It was a 12-month, really accelerated program. I was able to work in the Boston Public Schools full-time as a paraprofessional for the year I was getting my master's. I don't recommend that. It was awful. I cried so much. I remember sitting down with my now husband and saying, don't ever let me go back to graduate school, ever, no matter what I tell you. But what I learned was invaluable. And again, just having the eye-opening experiences. Chelmsford's an amazing town, and I wouldn't trade. We moved back here to raise our family.
Right. Yeah.
But it's one thing, right? You don't necessarily run into all the things. Although I'm watching it evolve before my eyes with the kids my children are going to school with, and the issues that my teacher friends are dealing with is just poverty and stuff that we didn't see as much when we were growing up here. But being in Boston, it was everywhere. I mean, I was just talking to colleagues today about how there were families that didn't have transportation to get to school. So I had 3 kids in my classes that we did parent-teacher conferences at their house. We went to their apartments, and that was how it went, because we needed to meet them and they could not get to us.
Right. And you still couldn't get to them probably through Zoom now
No,
either. You know what I mean? So it's probably still there.
Yeah, the inequities, absolutely.
Right, and having to reach them.
Yeah.
But is there a story of that one time that when you were teaching that was even more eye-opening of this is really what this is my passion, this is what I'm supposed to be doing?
I think all of those kids, I grew so much the 3 years I was in Boston. They were tough. And
it's amazing that they taught you, right?
Yeah, I mean, so much. When I think about who I was when I took the first job as a 22-year-old, like, you know, you're so idealistic, and I had just come out of the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, which I was going to like change the world and fight injustice, and then you know, boots on the ground is so different because you have limited resources and you're dealing with kids who are. I had a 4th grader who was so tall for his age, which is tough because people always expect more than the kid can actually produce. But he brought a knife to school. And we caught him, and he cried like a baby. And he was so upset with himself. Like, he was really upset with himself. And watching him struggle with the choice he had made and just letting his family down when his grandmother came in and to meet with us, it just made me realize, like, the education, yes, it's about teaching reading and it's about literacy and math and all those things, but it's also about forming citizens.
Yep.
And always being a student myself and learning more.
Learning more from them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you've hit a few other schools, right? You moved up to New Hampshire. You're currently a librarian.
Yes.
How did you make that transition to?
So when I left,
clearly books are your thing.
Books are my thing. But books are definitely my thing. I left my job in Boston without another teaching job. I had reached a point where I knew I just needed a change. It wasn't for me. Again, thickness of skin. And I was moving in with my now husband in New Hampshire, and I was taking a workshop. I actually signed up for a workshop in Bedford, New Hampshire. And I got to the workshop, and we had to introduce ourselves and say where we were teaching and what we were teaching. And I said, you know, I'm Kate McSheehy, and I don't have a job. And by the end of that week, they had me set up with interviews, and the rest is history. I was there for 6 years until I had my oldest. I taught 3rd grade in Bedford, New Hampshire, and to go from Boston Public, which was urban, very, very liberal, very diverse, to Bedford, New Hampshire, which is just amazing to see all the resources. I mean, it was. And the people, my colleagues, were just amazing. I'm still very close with some of them 2 years later. And I just loved it. I loved the kids. If I could shrink the distance between here, I did commute from Chelmsford to Bedford for a while after we sold our house in New Hampshire and moved back to Chelmsford. But it's 35 miles each way, and that's a lot of driving. So when I had my older kid, my first kiddo, I went back to finish the school year in 2008, and then I stayed home, and I made it till I worked part-time at our pediatrician's office for a while, which I still do, and then I decided to take in the son of a friend who had just been born, and I started watching him, and then I had a wonderful neighbor who mentored me through the licensing process to be a home daycare, and I did that for 9 years.
Yeah.
And then when my younger was ready to go to school full-time, I was ready to dive back in. And during the time I was home, I had been, you know, I said to my mom a million times, I wish I could just go back and have my certification as a school librarian, because that's what I would love to do. And I'd been volunteering at Byam in Jaden's library there. And this job was posted in Tingsboro as it's the library media specialist. My technical job title is literacy and technology specialist.
Yeah.
And they were hiring an elementary teacher. So I didn't need the specific license. And it felt like the answer to a dream. So
Yeah.
here I am.
And what kind of changes or like changes in your teaching? Because you're still teaching within that, being the librarian. Like,
Yeah.
but what are the changes that you felt? Like, not so much the classroom, because it's more as a librarian, right? You get to kind of have more one-on-one, right? With
Not really.
No?
I'm still teaching. It's interesting how, so I teach out of the ELA standards,
Okay.
English Language Arts.
Yeah.
I teach out of the Massachusetts School Librarian Association standards, and I teach out of the Mass Computer Science standards, because I do most of the digital citizenship for our district, for the elementary. I think one of the biggest things that hit me when I got back 4 years ago was the technology. And just being out, the expectation that I had a presence on social media as a teacher was mind-boggling. I was like, what do you mean I need an Instagram account? I guess I need to figure this out. I had personal Facebook, but using that so much as a platform for interacting with families.
Yeah.
And just, I've become an expert in all things Google Slides and Google Sheets and Google Docs, and just trying to play catch up with all of that.
Yeah.
But what you can do with it,
Now, did you just go home and ask your kids?
if they'd been just a little older, Jaden has definitely helped us. And we had to make this, we did a virtual kind of open house thing this year, and we had to make a video of all the specialists introducing ourselves. So we all made an individual little video on our phones, and then he put them together into
did he?
like an iMovie. Yeah,
Yeah.
my 8th grader, he has the technology. So I've definitely learned a lot from him.
Yeah.
But it's been wonderful to learn all of this technology, and it helped so much to have at least a little bit of a head start when we went into the pandemic last year.
Yep.
And the shutdown and needing to teach virtually.
Oh,
and
yeah.
so much online.
Yeah.
So.
So what would be are you saving it up for, it's Jaden?
Yes.
What are you saving up for him to say, okay, when you get to CHS?
Well, I've been harassing him about being in the marching band. So
Okay.
he's like already, I've had Mr. Sexhour harassing him about being in the marching band since he was little.
What instrument?
He's a percussionist.
Okay.
So, yeah, we'll see. I taught him the Chelmsford High Fight song.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think he remembers it, but it was one of the things I would sing to him when he was little. Just trying to, I want him to be as excited about Chelmsford High as I was. I guess one of the things you had asked me earlier about expectations, I didn't feel any big expectations, like living up to my parents or anything. Although I had my heart set on like a lead in the musical, because that was my mom's thing, which didn't pan out. But I got to do a lot of other wonderful things. And I love watching how education is changing, and the kids' leadership is so valued. And it was when we were there, but he's been involved with Dr. Parks as like a student ambassador and now a Pride rep, and I'm just excited to kind of launch him and watch who he's going to be.
Yeah. Lead the way,
Yeah.
like you did, because he's gonna, right?
Yeah.
He's got a sister.
Yeah, he's got a sister coming
right
up
behind him.
4.5 years.
Yeah, but that's still, he's gonna
still.
make his mark, because then the door is gonna open for her.
Yep.
Yeah. If there was one other thing that you can remember about Chelmsford High that has had a big influence on you, what would it be?
I just think that I value so much the music program.
Yep.
I lived in room 218 with Mr. Ondina. I mean, it's where I ate lunch, it's where I went before school and after school. And just the friends that I made, lifelong friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing to be a Lion, huh?
Yes, forever and ever.
Well, I would really love to thank you for coming in studio. We haven't been here in a long time, and it's amazing the stories that every Chelmsford alum can bring to the table. And your influence on kids has been amazing, and I wish you the best as you continue to do that. But I also wish your kids the best
Thank you.
and coming in behind you and your husband and making a mark, because I'm sure the grandparents are overseeing that as well.
Yeah.
Katie, so I'd like to thank you very much for being here. I know that your kids will do great because they have a great mom in education, and appreciate everything that you've brought to students that you've touched. So Thank you very much for being here. To everybody, thank you very much for watching our show today. If you ever want to be on Where Are They Now, please let me know. Thank you.